Hi, this is Keith Bedford, GM for EMEA Wurl, and this is the Sports Business Conversations podcast with ADC Partners.
Hey, this is Dave Elmy of ADC Partners, and thanks for stopping by to check out this latest episode of the Sports Business Conversations podcast. As always, our goal is to connect you with some of the most interesting and dynamic people in the sports industry, and then pull back the curtain a bit on what they're up to. Now, we're starting this episode with a bit of a history lesson. Back in the dark ages of television, people had about 5 channels to choose from. They had to negotiate with family members over who got to control the remote, and then they had to make sure they were in front of the screen exactly when their favorite show started. And if that sounds like it sucked, that is because it did. And I speak from experience as someone who rarely, if ever, got to control the remote. Fast forward to today. We live in a world where there are literally thousands of channels. Entire sports leagues are streaming online, and ads are tailored just for you. The shift has been nothing short of revolutionary. Our guest, Keith Bedford, has been on the front lines of this particular revolution since it began. Keith is currently a GM at Wurl, a company that sits right at the intersection of streaming, technology, advertising, and live sports. In our conversation, Keith explains how streaming is opening new doors for sports organizations, why advertisers are excited about targeting fans in personal ways, and how new platforms are shaping the way audiences discover and consume content. We also explore the opportunities and challenges for rights holders, what makes fast channels so compelling, and how younger generations are changing the very definition of watching sports. So whether you're in the business of sports, media, or marketing, or you just want to know what the future of watching live events looks like, you're in the right place. So thanks for listening in on my conversation with Keith Bedford of Wurl. Hope you enjoy. Keith, you've got a pretty extensive background in TV and media. So I'm wondering, with all that experience, what first drew your attention to Wurl? And what was so compelling at it that you decided to join them and what they're trying to do?
I've been in the broadcast industry for a long time, and I've worked in traditional broadcasts for a lot of the major companies supplying services. And I sort of see the shift about 8 years ago from traditional linear broadcasting to streaming and connected TV. I was lucky enough that I had a business that I sold into the Press Association. And from there, I started looking at sort of different consultancy roles, which led me into the sort of CTV and the ad-funded marketplace. And, I'd done some pitches to Wurl, I'd done some pitches to other CTV companies as well. And lucky enough, Wurl offered me a position. It was a sort of no-brainer, really. Looking at where the market's going, looking at where the change of pace is going, especially around viewership and, direct-to-consumer. And it was an opportunity I couldn't turn down. And,
was there something uniquely, it's lovely to have that sort of perspective as you're going through and taking a look and talking to and doing, like you said, pitches to the different companies. Was there something in particular about Wurl that made you think, oh gosh, these guys, they've got it more figured out than somebody else? Or, was it just a moment of opportunity for you?
Well, I think it's a bit of both, actually. I think, I could see the major players that are in this streaming marketplace, and I'd spoken to all of them, in fairness. I think what I got from Wurl was, the prospect of really driving our products forward. And I could see that, we're really a tech-focused business, and I think the opportunity to grow the product portfolio was there. I think they had the sort of foundations of, the channel business, but I could see a lot of their focus was going to go towards advertising. And at the time, that was after the acquisition from AppLovin. So I could see that there was definitely room for the company to grow and the finances to do it. So I think
clearly they have a backer. They're going to have some deeper pockets to be able to draw from. So they were going to be able to take advantage of this market, which I want you to touch on just a moment, if you could. Right? Can you give a sense of scale to the streaming market today
Yeah.
and what growth is going to be looking like. What should we anticipate as growth? I think everybody talks about subscriber numbers and running around with their hands over their head like I do, but like from someone who's inside the circle.
There's a lot of data out there, and I think the one that I'm looking at is the ad revenue, because ultimately it's an ad supported platform, both the over the top products, the direct to consumer plus streaming, everything's got to run from advertising. So I'm looking at where the ad model is, and when I joined the business, there was about $18 billion worth of ad going through CTV marketplace, and I think when we finished last year, it was at $29 million, $1 billion, not billion, sorry, not million.
Yeah, that's a different number there. I mean, I'm not a math guy, but
I think it's looking at being 42 billion by 2020.
Yeah, pretty soon you're going to start talking about real numbers there.
Exactly, and I think and we are seeing the growth in subscriber numbers. That's definitely happening. Yeah. And I think if I look at, I think I'm in a lucky position. I'm working in Europe, but I work with Wurl, who do a massive job in the US, and the change of speed in the US for streaming television has grown quicker than Europe. And there's a lot of things around, cord cutting. You've gone through a lot of that in the US. We're sort of really, probably I would say 3 or 4 years behind that. So
everybody's running around with scissors over their heads, getting ready to start the revolution.
I have the benefit of, seeing what's happening in the US. And it will progress to the rest of the world. That's always going to happen. A lot of the content that we get, a lot of the major sports content we get is all from the US. Yep. We've got our own, obviously, leagues and everything, which I can see growth. But, it's good for me. I can see what's happening in the US, and I can help try and predict what's going to happen in Europe.
So we've already had a couple of pieces of terminology that are very specific to streaming and broadcast and delivering video products to the masses. So before we go too much deeper, because I know there's a couple of people who are listening going, CTV and, everything like that. What are we talking about here? So can you, let's also before we get too much deeper into this, dive into some of the acronyms and terminologies that you deal with on a regular basis, but someone on the outside looking in may want to help get some deeper understanding of, right? Because we've talked OTA, CTV. I know FAST is certainly something we need to dive into. Can you touch upon each one of those and anything else that we should be thinking of as this conversation unfolds?
Yeah, sure. I think from OTA, I see that as over the air, and I sort of look at that as the more traditional method of receiving broadcasts, whether that's over satellite or over, I call it DTH in the UK, direct to home. That's good old aerial, which is now digital. So I see that as traditional linear. And I think for that, there's lots of arguments about, but surely, ad-supported channels have been here forever, and they have. The difference is with streaming is that we can see how many streams are actually connected.
It's a measurement issue, isn't it?
Exactly. When we're over the air, we don't really know how many people are connected to the satellite, and we don't know how many people are actually streaming it illegally from a satellite either. So there's lots of things there.
So I'm looking away from the camera right now on the illegal.
Yeah, exactly. I don't want to get to that. That's not my area. But over the air, I see that as really traditional broadcast. We plug a TV in, we plug an aerial in, or a satellite, and we watch it. OTT is sort of, I think, where, and they call that over the top, and that's where you're then plugging in a different connected device. It could have been in the early day a stick. It could have been it's in a connected streaming device in. That sort of changed the dial, I suppose, and that's where everything started to change, and over the top started to change everything. And now all of a sudden, when we talk about connected television, it's really how we're receiving our TV, and that's over an internet connect. So, and that's how I really see it. Simplicity is, we use an aerial and a satellite. We got traditional linear broadcasting. We connect into a stream. I'll call that connected TV. And I think there's lots of terms, and I think fast is the next one. And there's still people talking about what is a fast channel. Well, it's free ad supported streaming television, and that means that the ads that are going into that stream are delivered in a completely different way to traditional linear. Where they'd off cut to a different ad server and you get the ad load coming in. This is this is the digital way. This is the new way. It's through real time bidding. It's the same as how Google and Meta sell their ads. So we're in a whole different world. So when I get asked the difference, I always say, well, it's about how the ads are delivered, really. And when they're delivered over a stream, it's a completely different way. There's more data we can pick up. We know how many ads are being delivered. We know how many ads are being streamed. We know potentially where they're going, what devices are watching them. So it gives everybody so much more data. Is that data being used properly? Well, there's a whole other
that's a different podcast, Keith. We got to spend time on that at a different time.
Around that, for sure.
But you see how compelling this can be for marketers, right? Because you and I can be watching the same thing, and in a traditional environment, we're both seeing the same ad. But in this environment, you and I could be watching the same thing, and because of the profiles that have been developed online that represent you and I, we can see a completely different ad platforms and different messages associated with that. So just tailoring it to our particular interests.
And there goes the potential for streaming. It's it's about targeting. It's about targeting the right audience. Serving ads that and everybody wants the return on ad spend. I mean, back in the day when we had 5 channels, it was pretty easy to put some adverts out there for branding, and how many people the potential reach was. But you could see, because of the amount of channels where you were competing against, as your ads were doing well. Now we're talking about thousands of channels, and and there's a whole different podcast on discoverability. But
we're going to touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, we should do. And I think where the difference is, if I look at what's happening in mobile, the attribution for serving an ad and seeing that last click into an e-commerce site is there. So that's already available. In TV, obviously, it opens a whole new, different set of problems around how do we actually know what device it's been shown on and where that connection's been made to deliver that final click and that person's bought that product. So
it's shortening that distance between basically what had been a traditional advertising environment online and now one that exists in a video environment. And for those people who heard this conversation when Keith said, when there was 5 channels, yes, there was such a time, and you had to schedule your TV time with your family members to make sure you got to have it at the time of the program that you wanted to have, and it had to be seen live. Everything was live.
Exactly, and unfortunately, I'm that old that there was no mobiles around at the time as well, so we didn't even have a phone to distract us.
Really are going to be shocking people on this podcast with this sort of dive into history, and I think that actually brings up an important point we talked about. Just mentioned watching live. And is the role of sports in the growth of streaming and the trajectory of the ad buying and what that means to marketers trying to reach those audiences. So can you touch on for a moment the idea and concept of sport and how that weaves into Wurl's growth plans as you consider them?
Yeah, I mean, sports so, essential for broadcasters. I mean, if I sort of roll back time, all of the major rights deals, all of the major platforms that showed sports is where all the subscriber numbers were, and still are. But people are finding different ways to find content, and I think that's really what we're looking at here. Is I can look at certain of the big brands; they're all looking at a direct to consumer marketing strategy, which was really non-existent 10 years ago even. So they're definitely looking at how can we find our viewers, and it's got to be multi-platform. So it's not just streaming, it's obviously Instagram, it's Facebook, it's all of the other outlets of social media platforms. So and it has to be a combined effort. And if I look at World Rugby is somebody that we work with, we've launched a channel with them. They started with an OTT app, which is an online web page where you can go and view video, which we all know, and that started to go well. And what is the next strategy for them? They're not going to launch a satellite channel, but they have got an opportunity to launch streaming television channel, which now can reach a whole new audience. And someone like them, they're looking at where the future lies. Rugby is fairly big in the US, bigger than I thought. I think there was
growing.
And the Women's World Cup is going to be in the US. So I think there's a strong strategy to say, how can we target the US? And streaming is a perfect opportunity for that. So, they're on Samsung to start with, which is great. And they're just going to try and grow their reach. But it's a multi-platform approach. So, and it's that direct to consumer model, really, which I think where streaming is going to be going back to audience targeting, that's certainly something that everybody's going to be looking at. But I think that's where the growth is.
So as you approach rights holders like the World Rugby and others like that, what are those conversations like? What kind of questions do they have for you about how they apply this technology effectively? And what does that start to look like when you engage them on behalf of Wurl?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. What we did at Wurl is that we started attending some events, and Sporto in Monaco's great event. It's a very small event, and we were talking to these these rights holders, nearly 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, and that streaming strategy is really just coming to fruition now. And I think if I wear my European hat, obviously for us, we want to try and make sure we're hitting the US market, because that's currently where the dollars are. That's where the ad revenue is. And that's where you've got obviously a lot of viewers potential there. So for us, the questions were about, okay, what are the best platforms to go on? Is it Roku? Is it Samsung? Is it LG?
Okay, where should we be?
Where should we be? What connections do you have? And Wurl has built the business around building channels and be able to center multi-platform. So it's the question about what are type of potential viewerships we're going to get from these platforms. Then it's what's the potential ad revenue? What's the reach? All of those things. So we did help them all build a business plan, and with the numbers, we've got some really good tools here which we can forecast potential revenues based on scenarios. So is it soccer? Is it rugby? Is there any other channels that we can look at that are in the streaming market now?
Right. What's the competition?
How are they performing? And we help them build a picture of their potential market reach. So I think that was that's a good exercise, and we try and do that with all of our sports channels. And I think what we've seen over the last couple of years is how can we use that for live? And I look at how FIFA used that for live. When they launched, they had the Women's World Cup on territories that didn't sign the rights. So for instance, Brazil couldn't do a deal with the broadcaster there on the rights, so they streamed it on the Plus channel, which was a first, and the viewership was fantastic. And the same with
people are going to find the shows that they want to watch, particularly when we're talking about that kind of level. So if the challenge for the broadcasters in that kind of environment, now that proof has been laid down, has to be, I'm assuming, terrifying.
Yeah, I think for broadcasters it's terrifying. I actually think for the sports rights holders it's terrifying too, because they're all seeing a shift in ad revenue and where those ad dollars are going. And at some point, there will. I don't think there's going to be a massive cliff drop moment where everyone goes, "Wow, linear revenue's dead," and now we're all going to watch it on streaming. I think it's going to be a natural sort of progression into that. But I would say it's a worrying time for rights holders, and I see some of the big brands in the US, like the NFL, going direct to consumer. Their consumer strategy has changed. And I look at some of the sports brands in Europe, and I don't think they're looking at that yet. And I think there's some big brands, and I won't mention them, but I think, they haven't got any subscribers of their own. They haven't got any OTT products. They're literally relying on huge revenues coming to the big broadcasters buying up the rights. And at some point we can see it will start to dip, and I think you need a direct to consumer strategy. You need to get on it now.
It's such an interesting point, right? This rights holders have been living on media rights fees as the major source of income. It used to be, tickets were the engine that drove the train for sports teams, but no longer. I mean, I think an American football team gets a check for $350 million before a single snap is had. So your point being that there are teams and leagues out there who, if there's a little bit of head in the sand about what's coming.
Yeah. I think there is a sleep at the wheel I've used a couple of times, but
let's keep a sports analogy versus an ostrich analogy then. Yeah, it makes more sense.
Exactly. But it's definitely something everyone's going to be looking at. And the world has changed. I mean, I can see that in the way my children watch sports. They're not children anymore. They're adults, but they don't watch sports the way I do. We sit and passively take in a live game. they're watching clips, they're catching up. Sometimes they'll watch a live game, but it might even be on a device. It's very rare they sit still for 90 minutes to watch a whole game, which surprises me because I would say, right, okay, I'm going to watch Man United Arsenal. I'm going to sit there for 90 minutes and watch it.
Yeah,
and they're on their devices. Targeting and finding your new viewers is always going to be difficult, and I think that's what everyone's up against. It's a tough one.
So you bring up a really important point too. It's like how viewing is changing with sports, but that also means that advertising has to change as well. And we've talked a little bit about how it's delivered and what the role that Wurl is playing and making sure that advertisers are getting to the customers that they want. But how does the structure of advertising change as well when you consider viewers' tastes and their attention spans? Is that a challenge that Wurl is assisting with as well? It's about not only who the audience is, but how you're reaching them.
Oh, yes. Yeah, definitely. And I think there's lots of ways to do that. I mean, certainly, again, in the US, what we're learning from, our company there is you can target users and you can target what sports they're watching and see them switch channel. So, and after a time, content discovery is a product that we've got. And, you can target, a certain, viewer, whether that's in football, rugby, whatever, keep targeting with ads and see them switch. And then, they've made that switch. So there are some products out there. And I think we're at the really, with AI, we could have another podcast on that.
Oh my God. Keith, we just got to start a whole series on this.
I'm sorry. But, that's going to change, how that learns, the machine learning around how we're targeting, who's watching it, who's switching, the streaming numbers on the channel are growing. All of those things can be fed into, obviously, AI to establish how to market to the end user. So I think we're only really at the beginning. I think let's face it, broadcasters are faced with the biggest competitors are Google and Meta. And and Amazon.
1, 2. Yeah, that's it.
Exactly. And they are, and that's where the ad dollars are going. So there's a number of things that have got to happen. We've got to make it easy for the brands and the advertising agencies to place their ads very easily to target the right outcomes. And we've got all the data there, everything can be done. There's more work that needs to be done, but that is where we need to get to. Because if you're a brand owner and you want to target specific audiences, that's what you need to do, because that's what you can do on Google and Meta. And so you need to be able to do that in TV. And that's where the future, I think, and that's, that was one of the exciting things about joining Wurl, is that I can see that there's all the little elements there to get that in place. And it's just a matter of connecting the dots, which is something obviously we're working on. So, and I think that's, that's where the excitement is in that market. But it's also very, very complex because you've got lots of platforms that want to keep their data. No one really wants to share it yet. It's our walled garden. We want all the revenue. So that will start to change over time, I'm sure. The brand agencies are going to make sure that sort of happens so they can place ads. But it doesn't come without problems. But I think there's lots of the numbers and the potential opportunity for getting those numbers are there. But it's just about how we work together to make them happen.
Now, Wurl had an opportunity recently to work with a major streamer around Wimbledon and Wimbledon coverage. And I'm wondering what lessons were learned when you work on a major global event like that. What worked well? What were some of the challenges, and how do both get addressed and or amplified?
Yeah, I think, doing live sports, if I go back to my old world of linear broadcasting with outside broadcasting, switching live, all of those things were very highly expensive and complicated. And so were the channels to run it.
Yeah.
And if I look now at what we've created with technology and streaming, those costs have come right down. Obviously we don't do the live feed. That comes from a partner who is filming the event. But, I think the amount of people that we actually need to do this technology is far less than in my old days of an MCR and looking at thousands of screens and switching. So, that technology has opened up the ability to show live very easily and at a relatively low cost. So I think that's that. Scary for us. We've done lots of live events in the past, but when it's on a prestigious platform with Wimbledon, it does put the the ratings up very highly on getting this right. So that was obviously the stress levels of that was there. And also, just us learning how the workflow goes together. And I think, we've got a team dedicated for scheduling here, and they're very good on, scheduling these programs in earlier, making sure they're working, and also creating workflows for fast turnaround, which is traditionally something that we've had to do. I say fast as an acronym. But I mean, fast turnaround, we also had the highlights every night. They had to be encoded and ready for streaming the next day. So all of those things that we've been working on, we know it's already happening in traditional broadcast. So been exciting to work on those workflows around, how we get content quickly to the platform. And I'm seeing that not just from the sort of Wimbledon contract, but also with other brands that would say, okay, we own the rights. We can't show it on the day, but we want to give it to the consumer on CTV the next day. So, recording from live feeds, creating the audio, video and audio files ready for distribution next day is key products for us, and something that has to happen in fast. So they got the rights to show those the next day. So lots of learning curves there. And I think that, it's only going to get better the more we do. And, I think the opportunities there also for live where we don't have the rights to show in certain territories. So just going back to my point before about FIFA, really.
So it speaks to this idea of you can create a product so much more efficiently now than you ever could, but the demand for speed to get it out is a constant pressure. So there is sort of a do more with less. Now the technology makes that a bit more capable than it ever has been before, but that demand for that content is insatiable. You talked about the way that your kids consume content right now. Mine are the same way. It's like they want the highlight minutes after that it was delivered. But it sounds like in your mind, like these are all the issues that are currently being adapted for with how the technology is rolling out.
Exactly. And I think that, the fact that Wurl is a tech business gives us the opportunity to create some of those products. And, most of our employees are engineers, so it puts us in a good position to create technology quickly, which is, and at the moment we're a fairly good agile business. So that gives us the opportunity to move with market, which I think is key. But, again, it is so difficult to know where to target, where to stream. And, us talking about our children completely differently to how we watch it. But we have to adapt with the market. I think it's key. But, and also we've got to be realistic. I think CTV is a part of the sporting infrastructure. And I talked recently about how everybody has got to have a cross-platform marketing strategy. And, this is one part of it. And it's going to be a big part of it. But you also have to make sure you're promoting that channel on multi-platform. So you still got to use the traditional social media outlets to do that.
We talked about discovery previously. Yes. And this is sort of it's an interesting time to be a sports fan watching things on video, right? Because you've never had more access to different forms of content and different games and things like that, but it's never been harder to figure out what the hell's going on as far as where your team is going to be, right? Your favorite team might have 3 games appearing on 3 different channels or platforms. So how does Wurl help solve some of those sort of incipient challenges associated with discovery?
Highly frustrating, I agree. And if I had a crystal ball, I could solve it, but it's going to be a tough one. But that's because obviously rights is spread across so many different platforms. Yeah. I mean, for us, if we go back to a conversation we had about short clips, I know that Sky did a project with YouTube where they were putting out goal highlights, and that created reach to their Sky channels. And it just shows you that, going off and creating a short form to get to the long form is working. And I think that's definitely something we're looking at. How can short form clips drive you to the channel? So, the potential of, looking at small short form clips, on a reel, for instance, and then taking that to the channel is something we're looking at helping platforms do. So, I mean, I think that's key because we're all in this short form consumer habit, YouTube shorts and Instagram reels. Everybody sort of, can easily be addicted to that. But what's the outcome? The outcome is they stay on platform. So, we're trying to create something where you can use short form clips to target and switch to the main channels. And that's really about content.
Sort of go straight from.
Yeah. And I think we all have that problem, don't we? If we're looking at even what to watch, even if we take sports out of the agenda, how many times we sit there in the evening trying to find something to watch on our devices. And I think the average time is about 8 minutes to decide what to watch, which seems absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
It's because there is so much content.
And it's a deluge.
Yeah, and it's too much. And and you're right, we need to work out how to get to the sports fan and deliver the clips directly. So I think that is definitely a strategy we're looking to work on. Content discovery is key.
I'm interested in diving a little bit into your experience as someone who's been in business development and sales for a long time. And I'm interested in some of your perspective in the skills that you're relying on today versus maybe how you came up into the industry. Have they changed? Are the fundamentals that got you to this point the same that you're applying now? Like, what is success? What are the hallmarks of success for you from a skill standpoint that you continue to rely on?
Well, personally, I don't think they've changed that much. I think relationship building is still massively key to driving business forward. And if I go back to the statement earlier, when we visited Sportail, very important to make sure everyone knows who Wurl is, what is the brand, what can we help you with, what needs have you got to launch a streaming channel, understanding where the market is. I mean, if I go back 3 or 4 years ago, there was resistance to going to streaming, but now that's coming. Obviously, we rely on a great marketing team, to help us make sure we're promoting all the channels. But I do feel one-to-one, personal meeting and relationship building is still key to the commercial business for us, because we have to know the broadcasters. We have to know they're going to launch some channels. We have to know the streaming owners, rights holders only. And also it's important that we know the platforms, and you can only do that through relationship building. So in all my years of sort of, running commercial teams, I think it's so invaluable that we got people that can present well, can understand the customer needs, and really do it face to face. And I think Wurl's really good at, sending us to events. We're covering lots of events in Europe. If I look at my calendar for the next few months, I've got a lot of events coming up, a fair bit of travel, but it's the only way you get to meet people and understand what they're really looking for.
I'm assuming that that's even more important when you're talking about technology, which can be intimidating / overwhelming to people who don't think about it day in, day out. The ability to establish that trusted relationship with you is fundamental to helping move. It's not a quick sales cycle.
It isn't.
So, it's chopping away at that by making sure that you're present and develop that trust.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is key. And there are technologies that obviously can grow at scale without any humans. And that's there, and that's obviously going to do well. The business we're in, where it's, we're dealing with the content partners, and we understand what they need to do, and we help them launch a channel, and we get them live, etc., is all key. And that's a better relationship for the advertisers that they want to advertise them. Because when we look at our ad products, we know the content. We know a lot of the metadata. A lot of our data sets are enriched by the fact that we work with the broadcasters and the channels. So again, but we've only got there through building that relationship up. So yes, I think, when the streams are live, a lot of that technology takes over. The growth is through, real-time bidding, how to get the ads in, how to grow, etc. So that technology takes over. But it, initially, especially in the sports market, you've got to get to know everybody.
As you look down the road and as we begin to wrap up, I'm wondering what advice you have for rights holders now who are looking at the landscape ahead of them and are knowing they need to make a change or need to create opportunities for new products. What should they be paying attention to? What questions do you think they should be asking of people like you?
Well, I think they really need to look at their cross-marketing platform strategy. And I mean, making sure they understand where their end users are and what they're doing, how they're consuming content. And, I think CTV is one part of the strategy. Mm-hmm. And I think if you're not looking at that part of the strategy, you're potentially going to miss out on that viewership, getting live to many countries that aren't going to buy the rights that you can go to. So I think there's an opportunity for niche sports content and the big brands. And the big brands are obviously, all looking at their marketing strategies across the board. But there's the opportunity for the small brands to really get out there and target end users in a different way. So I've always loved marketing. I think that it's an essential part, and I see lots of people that don't do marketing for new channels, for instance, which I think, well, why wouldn't you be promoting it?
By all means, don't tell anybody you have this new product out there.
Well, if they come and talk to Wurl, they can find out more. But
Yeah.
I mean, I certainly think that it's so diverse how we get content. You've got to be looking at every strategy, and the money and the dollars will shift to different places, and you've got to go with market.
You have to be ready for them when they get there.
Exactly.
Keith Bedford of Wurl, I think we've identified 6 other podcast topics that we could probably have over the next course of the coming months. So I want to thank you for your time. But before I let you go, I've got to put you into the lightning round. I have a couple of different lightning round categories for you to answer. First thing that comes into your mind. Are you ready?
Yes, go.
All right, here we go. First one we'll call United Kingdom either or. Football or cricket?
Football.
No, that was if you're just listening, then you missed the dismissive eye roll that went along with that. All right. In terms of Bond, Craig or Connery?
Oh, Craig, definitely.
I'll go with Craig, the new one. Bangers or MASH?
Yeah, MASH.
Yeah, MASH every time. All right, so that's our UK either or. Now we're going to go USA, and I got some USA things, and I want you to give me the English equivalent of what this is.
I'm under pressure now.
All right, you can get. Well, I'll give you 2 options. You can give me the UK equivalent, or just the first thing that comes into your mind.
Okay, go.
All right, ready? All right, the USA. All right, Coors Light beer.
Oh, San Miguel.
Okay, NASCAR auto racing.
Oh, Formula One.
Okay, Bald Eagles.
Oh, that's a tough one. It'll be a sparrowhawk here or a red kite.
Sparrowhawk.
No one. That's a bit too small in fairness. Probably got that wrong. So I'll go with the second answer. It's a red kite.
Okay. Ford Mustang.
Oh, I love a Ford Mustang, but it'd have to be an Aston Martin for me.
Well, that's hard not to love as well. Last one, American football.
It's got to be soccer, really, isn't it?
I guess so. It just really has to be. Keith Bedford,
sorry for the young people.
Appreciate the time, man.
Oh, thanks very much. Enjoyed that. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the One-on-One Sports Business Conversations podcast. If you enjoyed it, we always appreciate a subscribe, share, comment, or like. And don't forget, you can always find past episodes at abcpartners.com/podcast. This podcast is written, produced, edited, and hosted by Dave Almy. And theme music was composed by Scott Holmes.